Hey, welcome back. So here we are. This should be the final video for this project, and what we're going to do is the styling. And I know a couple people have pointed out that I skipped some stuff and I missed some things, and we're gonna kind of cover some of that stuff, hopefully, in this video. I'm just gonna shrink my browser down a little bit here. And so you see I've got Visual Studio Code open and my live server instance running in the inspector set to developer mode. Well, I guess I'll show you guys how to do all that stuff. So the inspector, I've docked it to the bottom of my window, which you can do by clicking on this little dot menu thing going on here. And you can dock it to the right, to the bottom, to the left, or float it. And I just have it docked to the bottom of this window because I think this will be sufficient for what we're going to do. And then with the inspector open, I click this little button, the device toolbar, and that kind of throws it into a free flow responsive mode so that I can test out my responsiveness as much as I need to. I start at a width of 320 because that's about the smallest viewport that you'll find out there. That goes for the iPhone 4. I don't know how many of them are still left out there, but I'm going to go around 320-ish. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm not worried about it being exact, really. And what I kind of want to point out here is that there's already some the platform, like the web itself. When I say the platform, I mean the browser, the web rendering engine, or the browser rendering engine. It's responsive by nature, and you can see that because in the markup here we're going to start at the top and work our way down. So we'll start with our header and all of the things inside of it, and then we'll move on down the document doing our styling, which we'll get to here in a second. But what you'll notice is we have a header tag, has a class of header, we have a div with a class of header logo, and we have a div with a class of header text. And these two divs, by their nature, divs are block level elements, so they take up 100% of the width of their parent container. And the parent container for these two divs is this header tag. The header tag is also a block level element. And you can already see that by default they stack, right? This is the logo. If I go to my elements tab, here we go. This is what I want. Actually, I'm just gonna float this for now so that you can see it better. Boom. You can see that my header, if I go to the computed styles, it is set to a display of block. The computed tab shows you all of the properties that apply to any given element. It doesn't tell you where they come from or show you the cascade or anything like that, but it does show you that a header tag is by default a block level element. If I open this head tag and click on this div, it's also a block level element. Now, this property is inherited from the user agent style sheet. These two properties, they're kind of, in a sense, grayed out, and that just means that they're interpreted because we don't explicitly set a width or a height on these properties, but because they're block level elements, they have a box model, therefore they have a height and a width, and this is just telling you what they are. If I hover over the logo, you can see it comes back as a 315 pixels wide by 54 pixels high. That's all that is. Don't get too concerned with. These are just the box properties of this element that you don't actually set. You can set them, but we didn't. It's just being picked up by the amount of content that's in it and the fact that it takes up 100% of the viewport width, which we see as 100 or 315 pixels. So the header is a block level element. It's going to take up 100% width of its parent container. In this case, the parent container is the body or the viewport. Now I haven't, like, there's things I have to do to the body and the rest of the elements to, you can see there's a discrepancy between what I have set in my responsive box up here at 348 pixels, but the browser is only saying, oh, this is only 315 pixels. When we get into the styling, we'll see why that is. So I also didn't cover, so I don't have, we use placeholder images, right? So I didn't use actual images in the last video. And if I did, then they would just go in assets, images, and then this source would be like we did with the style sheet, assets, images, and then whatever the image file name is. We're going to make a change to the hero image when we get to it, and you'll see why when we get to it. So I guess to start off with, we should get into actually starting to style this. Some of the styling, I'm kind of old school, obviously, because I've been doing this for a long time. And I like to try to make the platform work for me instead of work against me. So I usually just try to let the platform do as much of the styling that's already inherent to it without modifying that as much as I can. So I'm not going to use any kind of CSS framework like Bootstrap or Foundation or I don't know, whatever else is out there. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to do regular vanilla CSS. I'm not going to do any Sass, nothing like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is fix my display. And I'm just going to use the asterisk selector. Oops, not the 8 selector. That doesn't make any sense. The asterisk selector. And that just means everything, like every single element. Actually, it doesn't include pseudo elements. So I'm going to do my before, and my after pseudo elements as well. And I'm just going to kind of reset them really fast and set the overall box sizing. So box sizing, border box, that will make some huge improvements automatically, and just clear out any margins and any, not 0%, and any padding. 0. Oops. Oh man, I can't type today. It's late. And when I save this, because I do have live server running, you can see that down here. It's on port 5000 or 5500. Once I save this, then everything will refresh. And then if I go back to the inspector, you should see that now. So these dimensions have now changed. Now it's 303 wide. So by setting box sizing border box, that's going to affect how elements display, and then in terms of the box model, and then remove all the margin and the padding. And now you can see that this header tag on its computed tab, just inherits box sizing border box, and now it's got all the different margins set to 0 and all the different paddings set to 0, but we still have a display block and a height and a width. If I go into the styles tab, you can see that when I select this header, the only thing that I have defined is this selector that I just created. So from here, we're just going to make this fairly simple, hopefully. What I want to do is take my header, so I'll just say dot header, and I just want everything inside of the header to be centered. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this mobile first, and as we go through it, I'll show you why it's very important to do mobile first. I've mentioned this in several Slack posts and several forum posts in review of people's portfolio projects. The browser has to parse, which is a fancy term for read, all of the CSS properties and selectors that you define in your style sheet. And mobile phones have, they work off of battery power, and if you have a lot of selectors in your CSS, then the phone has to parse a lot. The browser on the phone has to parse a lot of information, and it takes processing power from the CPU in order to do that, which means it's going to use battery power. And we don't really think about it, because like with like 4G connections on our phones or Wi-Fi connection on your phone, it's probably pretty fast, and you really don't care, and you don't think about it too much from a user standpoint. But as a developer, it's very important that you write very clean and very clear code, because mobile devices will bog down and choke, and users will never visit your websites because it takes too long for them to render, or it eats up too much battery power, or whatever the case may be. So the mobile first approach works in a way that allows the platform to do as much of the styling natively as is possible, and you just apply a set of minimal styling to the mobile view, and then you increase the width of the browser until you need to make a change, whether it's a font size is too large, or maybe an image is too large, or the layout needs to be modified in some way. Then you set a breakpoint using a min width media query at whatever value that is, and then you make your adjustments to your selectors and your properties, and then you make your browser wider until you need to do that again, add another breakpoint, make your change, increase your browser width, rinse and repeat until you've added all of your breakpoints. And what that does is it allows for the smallest devices to do the least amount of CSS parsing, which in turn has an effect of faster rendering time, less battery power consumed, and it's just an overall better experience for mobile users on their phone. And that's kind of the goal with a mobile first approach. The other approach is to use a desktop first approach, which is not recommended. In that case, you would start with your browser at full width, 100% width of your desktop browser, and then you would add all your default styling at that point. Then you would shrink the browser viewport until something was broken, something needed to be adjusted, font sizes needed to be smaller, images needed to be smaller, layout needed to be tweaked, whatever the case may be, and then add a media breakpoint using a max width media query, and make all your changes, shrink the browser, add another breakpoint with a max width media query, add all your changes to your selectors and styles, shrink the browser all the way down to the mobile. And what that will do is cause the mobile phone to render the desktop styling by default first, then all of the breakpoints in between until you get to the point where it fits on the phone. And that causes the most amount of CSS parsing on a mobile device and the most amount of battery power that you can possibly imagine. So that's why we don't use a desktop first approach. When I first started doing responsive design back in around 2006-ish, 2007, somewhere in there, it was kind of a new thing, and media queries weren't quite supported yet, but they were working on it, and nobody really had any concrete methods in terms of responsive development, so a lot of things were done wrong. And I learned a lot of things in the process. So what I'm going to do is apply default styling right here at the smallest mobile viewport that I can imagine. Oh, there is one other thing I'm going to do just to make this really simple. I'm going to take every single image tag. This is probably a bad idea because I'm using an element selector, which adds a lot of weight to this CSS specificity, but I'm just going to say their max width is going to be 100%. And their height is auto. Some of you might pick up on what I'm doing. I'm ordering my properties in alphabetical order. It's a thing we do at work. It's stronger than me. I can't help it. So with that being done, let me save this. That will make my images immediately responsive. And now I've lost my scroll bar at the bottom, which is what you want. Let me comment this out. The reason I have this scroll bar here is because these images are a width of 480 pixels wide, and they're not responsive. So it makes my browser window scroll, and I don't want that. I want my images to be responsive. And in order to do that, there's two ways to do it, really. This is the preferred method, using the max width property. max width will allow you to increase the width of the browser and the images, or decrease it, and the images will adjust their aspect ratio to automatically fit in that viewport until the viewport gets wider than the maximum width of the image. So once my viewport hits around 480, my images should stop growing. See, they're still growing, still growing. This is 480-ish. There, they've stopped right there. The reason it's a little bit more, it's not quite 480, it's like 490 something, is because of this right here, the scroll bar in the browser UI. And I guess Mac does it differently now, where it doesn't affect all of that, but Windows is still the same. So yeah, it's an operating system specific thing. So you can see that these particular images are only 480 pixels wide, so they hit a breakpoint, they hit that max width, and they stop growing. So the other way to do responsive images, and sometimes I use this, but it just depends on the image. Instead of setting a max width, you can just say width 100%. It kind of sort of has the same effect. You can see it's really jacking up my logo image, because that image is only 50 pixels wide by 50 pixels high. And the difference is that this takes the image and it forces it to always be 100% width of the parent container. It still maintains its aspect ratio. In the case of my header logo, which is only 50 by 50, it's very distorted because it's a tiny image. But these 480 by 250 and 480 by 150 images, they can go a lot farther before they start getting distorted. But you'll notice when I hit that 490 something mark, the images don't stop growing. They continue to grow until I make it, let me get a little more space here, until I just go, you see, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is not always the best option, but you might, it's good to know this technique because you might want to use it at some point. But I'm going to go back and put it back to max width because that's all I really need. So max width. This is what you want to stick with. What I could do, actually, and what I am going to do, on all my images, I'm going to add an extra class. Let me just find them all. Let me do it this way. This is quicker. I'm just going to highlight and Control D. And that's going to give me, until I get all the image tags. Yeah, and that's all of them. Right? And then, oh, you know what I should have done? Let's see. Can I just hit the down arrow? Looks like I can. Because all my images wrap to a second line, right? So, when you're working with multiple cursors, you got to be really careful because they may not always be in the same place. So what I'm going to do, since all of my image tags are wrapping to a second line, right? This one wraps at the class attribute. This one's in the middle of the alt attribute. Middle of the alt, middle of the alt, and middle of the alt attribute. What I'm going to do is hit the left arrow to put my cursor at the start of the image tag. So now all the cursors are at the start of the image tag. Then I'm going to hit the down arrow to put them all at the start of the second line. And then I'm just going to hit the end key, END, the end key on my keyboard. And that will move the cursor out to the end of the image tags. And you'll notice that, like, the way I've placed my attributes on my image tag, they're all in the same order. Source attributes first, then the alt attribute, and then any classes that I might need come after that. This allows me to use the arrow key to back up. All the cursors are in the same place in the image tags. It'll back up to inside of the class, which is exactly what I want. The other way would be able to, like, click, hold control and click individually inside each class, and that would be whatever. Or I could just, I don't know, if I wanted to live crazy and dangerous, I could do them one at a time. What? I have multi-cursor support and stuff like that. Why would I ever do that? So I'm just going to add a class. I'm going to knock off Bootstrap and say responsive -image. Oops, image. That's like Bootstrap's image responsive class, just backwards. So I'm going to save this, and then I'll come back to my style sheet. And this is just so that I can avoid doing this, because I don't want to use a element selector because it adds way too much weight. So responsive -image, and then that will fix all of my images and make them responsive, and I lose my scroll bar, and it makes it super simple to add more responsive images in the future if I need to, to my layout. I go back to about 320-ish, okay, and let's start with the header. So what I want to do on mobile, I've got a logo and I've got some text, and on a mobile device, I'm just going to keep it simple and say text align center, and that should center everything like that in my header. Magic. That's amazing. Super simple. I'm not going to go into like font styling and colors and blah. That's all designy specific stuff. I write code for a living. I don't do design stuff. I'm a web developer, not a web designer, because there's a difference. I know some of you in the course are like all designy and stuff. Have at it. You guys can do that stuff. That's cool. That's amazing. My brain doesn't work that way. The only thing I am going to do to my header is bump everything off of it just a tad. So I'm going to give it a margin bottom of like 30 pixels. There we go. That kind of pushes the hero image away a little bit and gives me a little space in there. Cool beans. That's all I need for my header on a mobile device. Like, that's it. That's all I'm going to do. On a mobile device, I should probably use a responsive image to make like a bigger logo, but not a designer. I think I mentioned that already. So the next section that I want to tackle, now that I'm done with my header at this breakpoint, at this screen size, I am done with the header. I could go into content, but really, wow, we need to tackle this hero image. Actually, we'll come back to the hero image when we get into the actual responsiveness. Right now we're just on a mobile, and this works fine. So everything else I think is okay. The only other thing I want to do, like my section here, is a little close to the hero image. So what I'm going to do to the section is just give it, what did I call that? I just looked at it and I forgot. Featured work. So dot featured work, and I'm just going to say margin top 30 pixels. I want to match what comes off of the header. The other option, the way to do this, would be to grab the content class, right? I could remove this and remove this altogether, and just say dot content and do margin. I'm going to use the shorthand property. This applies 30 pixels to the top and bottom and 0 pixels on the left and right. And I should get the same. Oh, no, I won't actually, because section is inside of content, so that won't give me the same effect. I still have to do the featured work. So that's not going to work at all. So we'll just leave it like that. Margin on the header, margin on the featured work, and that gives me that space in between each of these. Just a little bit, not a whole lot on the phone, not a big deal, because you don't want people scrolling forever to see your content. That'd be ridiculous. Who'd want that? So the next thing, I want all of this content to be centered as well. So I think this is the featured header, content header. Yes, the content header. We're just going to copy this, and then I'm going to put it above here because the content section, whoops, what happened there? Dot content header. Oh, this is a Visual Studio trying to be helpful. Psst, not helpful at all. There we go. Content header, I'm just going to say text align center. Boom, there's that. And then all I want to do for each featured item is I want them to be centered as well. So actually I'm just going to go content header, comma, featured item. Save that. And there we go. And it actually, I think for each featured item as well, I know you guys are thinking, oh, you're repeating class names. Oh, no. We'll cover that in just a sec. I'm just going to give them each a little margin. Top and bottom of about 20 pixels and nothing on the left and right. Save that, and that'll bump them out a little bit. So now everything's nice and centered. It's a good display. obviously it's not very pretty because like default fonts and whatnot. I'm not gonna worry about that stuff. I guess I could do something simple, right? Because that serif font's really killing me. I could do font family and just grab what Arial here, right? There we go. That's a little better, a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit. So that's it. That's it. That's a good layout for mobile. Everything's centered, nice and easy to find, easy to read. Fonts aren't too bad. I'm actually gonna show you guys how to do font sizes so they're responsive. So let's just do. What would be an easier way to do this? Let's add just a kind of generic. I'm just holding the control key and clicking in these elements that have font. Featured link is actually going to be fine. And I'm going to add another class, text item. Yeah, that's good. Text item. So what I can do, just so I kind of have a pattern, like responsive image. That's what I consider to be like a global kind of thing that I can apply all over the place. And like I'll just do something like this and say global, like global styles, right? And I could move all this global styles. I can move all this into another style sheet or something if I wanted to, but this is a small project, so I'll just do end global styles, something simple. So another global style will be this text item, and so here's the thing, like back in the day, before we had these amazing units that I'm going to show you, you could use like pixels for font size on the web, and that was like all we had. And then they came out with ems, and we could do ems, and ems are like relative units. And then they came out with the rem, and the rem is like a, I forget what it stands for right now, but it's relative to its parent container kind of thing. And those were all great, but they're not responsive. Like none of them are responsive. They're all like fixed width units, even ems and rems. They're ems and rems aren't considered fixed width units, but for responsive purposes, they're still fixed width units because the font doesn't actually change with the viewport when you resize it. So now they have this two new units, VW and VH, stands for viewport width and viewport height. And the way it works, I'm just going to set the font size to like 4 VW. And now when I save this, watch what happens. Everything's going to be the same font size. It's going to look weird. So that's 4 VW. I'm going to make my browser a little wider so I can show you how this works. Now that's 1 VW is 1% of the viewport width. So as your browser gets wider, your font is going to get bigger all by itself. So like right now my font is 4 VW, so it's 4% of the viewport width. VW is not the same as a percentage. If I said like 4%, it would be 4% of, I don't know, nothing really. I guess maybe the body tag, which has like a default font size of 16 pixels. But that's not the same thing. It's not going to grow with the viewport width. That's what you want it to do. You want, like, as the viewport gets wider, you want the font to get bigger. And I'm going to demonstrate that. So watch, as I make my viewport bigger, you can see that my font is also getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's going to get a point where that font's going to be too big. So I'll set like a media query and then change it to like something smaller. But 4 VW is a pretty good font size. No, actually not a good font size for 320. It's too small. For mobile devices, you usually want to go around 7 or 8 VW for most text. So let's see what 7 looks like. You'll notice like my actual headers, 7 looks good. Right, this is readable. Right, this is viewable. Actually, I'm going to go 6 because it's a little big. And I know I said I try to keep my indentation to 2 levels, but I'm going to add another thing here. This is going to be text item. This is for headers. Just for the headers. So text item header. This is a header. There's another one. Another one. And another one. Right? So now I've got text items at 6 VW, and I can do dot text item header at like actually let me bump this down like 5, and then do this at 7 VW. Now, what I want you to notice is that what I should probably do is define this one first. But let's take a look at the cascade and see what's happening. Let me get my inspector back here. So in my header text, I have this header class, this header item rather. This header tag has a heading tag. We mentioned that in the other video. It's a heading tag. You can see what's going on. The class text item is applied to it, and it gets a font size of 5 VW. And then the class of text item header is applied to it, and that overrides that 5 VW and makes it 7 VW. And this is the kind of thing that you want to try to avoid on a mobile layout, right? On a mobile first layout. So what I'm going to do, I have 2 options. I can just, well, no, I can't do that. All right. Let's move it around. Let's move this above, and let's see if that fixes the problem. So in theory, what should happen according to the cascade is that this class will be applied to the headers, and this class will be applied to everything else. So if we come over to our inspector and we look at our heading, oh, wait a minute, something's not right there, because now our font size for the heading tags is only 5 VW, and it should be 7. And that's because it's still being overridden. So reordering your selectors isn't really going to make a difference in terms of the cascade. The last selector to be interpreted, which would be this one, is the one that gets applied. The problem here is that my text item is still on my header class, my heading tags, sorry. So I need to remove this text item from my heading tags and just use the text item header, which I'm just going to change to text header. Text item, and that will eliminate an extra hyphen. Text item, text header, get rid of this, and get rid of this. There. Save this, and now I lose my font style. I come back over here, and now if I remove item from here, so I just have text header, that should do what I want. Oops, I missed one. That's looking better. So now my heading tags have a font size of 7, whereas my other tags have a font size of 5. And that makes it look somewhat natural at this viewport width. And that's really all I need to do. The only other thing I'd be missing, like coloring or whatever. This was the look that I would want to achieve on a mobile device for this particular layout. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is just increase the width of my viewport until it gets to the point where I don't like the way it looks. Fonts are getting kind of large, and I'm guessing my images, are gonna stop responding. So let's say 480. So here's how this works. I have options. All right, this is going to end like all of my mobile styling at this point. Well, not all of my mobile styling, but most of it, like the default stuff. That's the end of it. It's all done. This is all I got. Now, I didn't do things like, color the text or the links or any of that stuff. I didn't do any of that. That would be in here as well. I don't know, somewhere. So what I'm going to do is set a media query at the bottom. Media screen and min width 800 pixels. And let's see, I think the header is still fine. I just need to fool with the font sizes a little bit. So I'm just going to copy these two selectors. I'm going to paste them down here inside my media query. And maybe bring headers down to 6 and items down to 4, right? Keep that 2VW ratio going, right? Okay. So, did I miss something? Oh, whoops. 800 pixels. That's way too large. Y'all caught that, didn't you? I bet you did. So now, there's a little jump. I'm going to get to just before the 480, and oh, there it goes. Boop. Little jump in the font. Just a little bit. It's tolerable. I think it's fine. Yeah, I think that's fine. Now we need to deal with these images down here for featured work, right? At this point, what I want to do, this is only like 480 pixels wide, so it's not that wide. What I want to do is take the featured container here, the one that holds all of my stuff. Well, let me think about this for a sec. Let's see. Should I just make the images bigger? No, I don't want to do that. And 480 is really tiny. What's a viable option? $480. Yeah, I'm just gonna make the images bigger. So, because 480 is just too small. So this is the featured image, right? So by default, all of my images are a max width of 100%. But when I get to this 480 pixels wide, I want my featured images to have a width of 100%. And then they're just going to grow on their own until we get too big. And I'll probably do like 720. Yeah, 720 sounds good. So I'll set another breakpoint for 720. And I know you're thinking like, well, the hero image is all messed up. Yep, we're going to come back to that. Did I do it again? I did it again. 720. And then here comes the amazing part. You ready? I'm going to take the featured container at 720 pixels. I'm going to say dot featured, and I'm going to say display flex, because this is part of the rubric. I personally wouldn't use flex. I would do something else. And then I would take dot featured item. Each featured item. Oh, typos are trying to get away from me tonight. Featured item. And give them, well, let's not do that yet. Let's just see what this is going to do, because I've got my images set the way I do. I save that, and ooh, that's pretty bad. This is not what I want. This doesn't look good at all. And my images are being weird. They're not the same because this text is longer than this text, which is longer than this text. So I'm going to fix that by modifying the title back to awesome for each one. That fixes my images. All right, let me just cover that again so that you guys don't get lost on what that was actually doing. All right, here's the deal. So I've set the container to be flex. And that makes, like I mentioned in the last video, that makes each immediate child of that container now becomes a flex item. So at 720 pixels, my featured class becomes a flex container, right? So now each item is a flex item. Each one of these featured items becomes the immediate child, or is the immediate child, so it becomes a flex item. And with the way flexbox works is there are three very important properties that you need to pay attention to. If I set the property on each one, it's called, well, the first property is flex grow. And if I set flex grow to 1, right, then what happens is, as the viewport gets wider, each container will only grow a maximum width of the largest container, if that makes sense. Then if I set flex shrink to 0, then you can see that made a change immediately. So what's happening is I'm telling it, hey, don't ever shrink. So now they're growing to the maximum width of themselves. So the reason this is so long is because of this text. You see the text is not wrapping. This one's even longer because this is awesome. It's longer by 1 character. This is longer by 2 characters. And that's having an effect on the images because the images are set to be 100% with their parent container. And they maintain their aspect ratios. So this container has a width and its image maintains the aspect ratio. This container is a little bit wider. This one here, so you can see the first container. Let me scroll on back. The first one is 533.69 pixels wide, right? Then I'm going to scroll over. You see the second one comes out at 550.55 pixels wide, and then the last one comes out at 572.2 pixels wide. So you see each one's a little bit wider than the one before it, and that's because of the text that's doing it. 533, 550, and 572. So to fix that, what I'm going to do to fix that is just use the same text for each one. That's not necessarily the proper fix, but that's the fix I'm going to apply in this case. I know you guys are going to have a million questions about what else can I do? How else can I fix it? And you don't want to hear what I'm going to say because the rubric means says we have to use flexbox. Right? Now, everything looks fine. Everything's amazing. I need my inspector back. Thank you. So there we go. There's our featured container, and you have each featured item at 240.76 or 67 pixels. 240.67, 240.67. So there we go. Magic, right? Magic. So at 720, boom, I get a flexbox. And what I don't like is the fact that there's no space between them. So what I can do on each featured item is modify this margin to be 20 pixels top and bottom, and we'll say 20 pixels on the right, 20 on the bottom, and nothing on the left. And then I have to change the last one. Actually, I'm going to have to do that in here. So at this breakpoint, I want to target my featured item. Say margin and 20 pixels on the top, 20 pixels on the right, 20 pixels on the bottom. Sorry, 20. I got people messaging me on Slack and stuff, and nothing on the left. And then the very last item, right? The very last one. Featured item, colon, last child. right? I don't want any margin right on this one, because you can see the effect it's having where this side is flush to the left, then it's got the margin right, and this has margin right, and this has margin right, so it's not flush. So by using the last child pseudo selector, I can tell it, hey, margin right 0, and that will flush this edge up, or that side up to the edge of the browser. So I save, and there it goes. Now I've got space in between, right? So that's pretty simple layout going right there. The only problem is I don't want this thing to stretch forever, because then it's going to look weird. 480 plus 480 is 960, and then 480 on top of that, I'm trying to math it in my head, I should know it, is like 1440, right? 960, yeah, 1440. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say max width on this container, 1440 pixels, and then set its margin to 0 and auto. And that will center that element at 1440 pixels and larger. So let me just make this really large. And as I get to, before I get to 1440, everything will keep growing. So what I don't want to do is stretch those 480 pixel wide images past that 480 pixel mark. And to do that, I just need it to stop at 1440. It just stopped. Oh, there it goes. And now you see they don't stretch anymore. The whole thing just becomes centered. Now, obviously my fonts are way too big, and I'll need to set more breakpoints for those. So maybe is that still too big, you think? 830? Yeah, it looks good to me. I'm going to minimize this now. It's getting too large. So if I do add media, screen, and oh, man, I cannot even today. Min width 830. And just grab my text header and text item and go like 4 and 2. Let's see how that looks. Wrong one. Yeah, that's better. That's more readable. So it goes from here. I hit 830. Boom, we get here. And then I think, wow, maybe one more. 1240. Yeah, 1240, I guess. And it's just kind of a guess, you know, like, hey, is this a decent width? Should I go a little more? You just gotta use some judgment. Min width. That L keeps getting in my way. 1440 pixels. And I'll just paste those back in. And we're at 4 and 2, so I'm going to go 2. And I'll go 3. 3 and 1. Let's see how that looks. Oh, wrong one again. Right. Oh, I did 1440, didn't I? Whoops. 12. What do you say? 1230. But it's only 930. I'm just kidding. All right. So yeah. Boop. And I think that's good size. Right. Kind of makes it stand out. Maybe that's still a little too big for the featured titles, but I think the header's okay. Oh, that's what I forgot to do. We got to do the same thing for the header because we need the image to be on the left and the name and title to be on the right. So we're going to do that at about 720. Might as well do it at 720 since we already got a breakpoint there. That's fine, since that's where our other one goes in the flexbox. So 720. We're just gonna say comma dot header. Actually, we're gonna switch those because in the markup, that's the order that they come, and that's just a convention that I use. And then I gotta fix the font sizes as well. So, oh, actually, I need to do something else. Ha ha ha. Okay. So what's happening? Let's take a look in the inspector and see if we can figure out what's going on here with the header. Why does the header look so busted up right here? Our featured images look fine. They look great, right? 1, 2, 3. They're all like spaced nice and evenly, and they look good, and they line up. But when you get into the header, holy monkey, what is going on here? Can I get both of these? Yes, I can. Something like that. So my header, right? Oh, I lost my margin bottom. Right, so I need to change this to, well, I need to do another one for header anyway, so dot header. Oops, that needs to come up. Oh, I didn't tell you guys this, but if I hold down the Alt key in Visual Studio Code, and this is just baked in, I can take a selection, hold down my Alt key, and hit the up and down arrow keys, and it will move it up and down one line at a time. Keyboard shortcuts for the win. Margin bottom 30 pixels. That's not going to work either. This has to come out of here, unfortunately. This needs to be margin. I don't want anything on the top. I want it to be auto, and 30 pixels at the bottom. And then I'll actually have to do another one for not featured. That's unfortunate. Margin. And it's the same thing, 0 auto. Oh, sorry. It's actually going to be 30 pixels, auto, 0. And that should fix my layout back the way I want it. Yes, now I got my spacing back. Okay. Okay. All right, so the featured container here is a flex container, and it has 3 items in it, and those items are filling the entire width, right? The way Flexbox is designed, each flex item will fill, by default, 100% width of the parent container. They act kind of like block level elements. Now, these are divs, so they're block level elements anyway, so they're kind of going to do that. But what's happening with the header, in the case of featured item, we've set every featured item to be text align center. Okay, that's why it looks the way it does. But when we come to the header and we give it a display of flex and a max width of 1440 pixels, the logo is just fitting to its width. That's all it's doing. And the remaining width in the header is being taken up by the header text right here. So this is not the desired layout that we want. So what we can do, and I can never remember this property, but on just the header, what we want is, I think it's align content, maybe, and you want space evenly. It's not content. I think it's items. I always forget this, and I have to do it in here because I forget how it works. My dogs are barking. Sorry. No. It is align content. It is align content. It should be space evenly, but it doesn't want to do it. There's another way, but I don't like it. Justify content. Yeah, that's what it is. Justify content space evenly. You're like, well, that doesn't look right. No, it doesn't, because header is set to text align center. That's the issue. We need a class for header text and header logo. Or I guess we could. Well, it won't matter. It's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other at this point. What I need to do is remove this text align center on header. We can do that. Let me go back and set that justify content. Justify content space evenly, and then we'll just do text align left, and then for header text, we're going to do text align right. Once we save that, then things will look the way we, oh, maybe not. We need header logo as well to be text align left. It should have picked it up from the header tag. Well, that's just wonky. Something strange going on there. Oh, not evenly. Space between. I knew something was wrong there. It's late, and I've been up working all day. Space between, and then I should be able to get rid of this. I'm pretty sure. Wrong button. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Take that out. And then when we get to that 1400 pixel mark, 1440, whatever it was, we said 1240, 1214, 1440. There, boom, it stops. And everything just keeps going. Now, the only thing that's left is this hero image. Now, so I didn't use actual images, right? I used placeholder images kind of thing. And that wasn't what people wanted, I guess. It doesn't really change that much. But what we're going to want to do is make that a responsive image. And by responsive image, I mean an actual markup responsive image. So the way to do that, and if I had images, the only thing that would change, like I explained earlier, the only thing that would change is the source property, and it would just be assets/images/ whatever my image is going to be. So I'm going to modify this, and I'm going to add in the source set attribute and set that equal to 3 images from placeholder.com. Now, what people were asking me is, when I do this, this is going to be my small. My next one will be a medium image of like 960 by, we'll say 250. And then my large will be like 1920 by 350, something like that. All right, and then I need to add the, what is that in there? Sizes attribute, and in my case, I want all of them to be 100% of the viewport width every single time. And then the default source should be, all right, so the best practice is to set it to the small image, which is this 480 by 150. However, IE11, if you have to support IE11, then IE11 does not understand source set. And what you will get instead is the regular default source image. So what I do at work is set this to the 1920 image, the large image, right? 1920 by 350. It's what I have to do. It's either that or I have to write some JavaScript to automatically detect, use like Modernizer and figure out if it supports source set or not, and then use that class to target the image tag and use JavaScript to update the source attribute from the small to the large image. Otherwise, on IE11, all you're going to get is a small mobile-sized image, and it's really not going to look right. It's going to look really bad. So now with this being done, if we go back to the page, and the way Chrome works is that it caches all of this goodness. So I'm going to put this at the bottom, and all we're going to pay attention to is our network tab and images specifically. Let me refresh the page. I'm just holding down the left mouse button and empty cache and hard reload. And you can see the page is loaded fresh, all brand new, nice and clean. And I have downloaded a 50 by 50 placeholder image for my logo, which is right. I have downloaded a 480 pixel by 150 pixel image. Notice I only downloaded one of those, even though there are 3 of them. That's pretty smooth. And I have downloaded a 480 wide by 250 pixel high mobile image for this responsive image. So this is important because this is the image that I want to download for mobile devices. Ideally, this image will have a smaller footprint, smaller file size, and it will download faster on mobile devices, on smaller devices, things on 4G networks and that type of thing, 3G networks, 2G networks, right? But if I start to resize my browser, when I get past the 480 pixel mark, the maximum width of this image. Oh, I know what I forgot. I forgot to do something. You have to specify the actual width, the physical width of the image in the source set declaration. So for each one of these, I need to do 480 for the small, 960 for the medium, and 1920 for the desktop. And notice that the unit of measure is just the W, the letter W. This is the only place you'll use this in markup or CSS or anything. I haven't seen it used anywhere else except for in the source set attribute, right? So what happens is this tells the browser, all right, the browser knows that it has these 3 images, right? Because you've provided them to the browser as a set, right? A source set. It is exactly what it sounds like. And the browser also knows that one of them is 480 pixels wide because you've told it that. Another one is 960 pixels wide because you've told it that. And the last one is 1920 pixels wide because you told it that. Don't worry about that space right there. That's just like an OCD thing for me. You don't actually need that. So one is 480, one is 960, and one is 1920. And then you have this sizes attribute. And I've just said for every one of these, no matter which one you're displaying, figure it out based on 100% of the viewport width. I used to use, and if you look at the MDN documentation, it actually says 100%, right? Except the W3C validator throws a warning that that is not valid at all. So you have to use VW in order to fix it. So I could say, hey, this is what I used to do. I would say min width like 480 pixels, right? And set it to 100 VW because that's what I want it to be. And then I would do another one, min width 960 pixels, 100 VW. And then for anything else, like if those 2 media queries didn't work, then just make it 100 VW. And I said to myself, why am I doing that? Because everything's 100 VW. It doesn't matter what the min width is. I don't even care about the min width. I just want everything to be 100 VW. and that's what I want for this image, right? For things like these images down here, then that doesn't really apply. These images are already mobile size, and that's all you're going to get. But if you needed to work something out for these images where maybe you did get bigger pictures on bigger devices instead of getting the 480 by 150 thumbnails or whatever you're going to crop your thumbnail images out to, you know, you could use a responsive image here as well, and then you would use a more relevant sizes properties. And the way the sizes work, and go back, if I left it like this, the way this works is it looks at this media query and it says, hey, this media query doesn't apply because maybe the browser is narrower than 480 pixels, right? Say we're on an iPhone 4 and our browser is smaller than 480 pixels. Then what happens is it says, this is false, right? This media query doesn't apply because I'm underneath it. This one also doesn't apply because I'm underneath it. So it falls back to this one, right? And then it knows that it has these three images because, like I was saying before, we provided it to the browser as a set of source images. And it knows that one of them is 480 wide, one of them is 960, and the other one is 1920. So it knows that the viewport width is, say, 320 pixels wide. Based off of the media queries, none of them apply. It falls back to 100 VW, and it says, let me get the smallest image that will fit within 100% of the viewport width. Right? It's kind of weird and complicated and takes a little while to get your head wrapped around it, but that's what's happening. Now, when I resize the browser, once it gets to the min width of 480 pixels, right, then because I still have my 100 VW, it isn't really going to matter. Like the sizes isn't really going to make a difference because the determining value is always the same, 100 VW for me, for this particular image. So that's why I was saying I don't need these media queries, right? But let's say I did, and let's say I wanted it 100 VW here, and then at 960 I only wanted it 50% of the browser width, and then I want to default it to 1, which would be weird. All right, let's say that's what I had. Then it would say, hey, at 960 pixels, my viewport width at the width of the viewport at 50% is going to be 480 pixels. So then it would go and get this 480 pixel wide image again. Well, it wouldn't get it again, but it would swap it out, and that's what you would see. At least that's the idea anyway, if that makes sense. So I don't need these media queries. They're not a thing that I need to have for this particular image. I just want it to fill the browser viewport all the time. So now with that in place, what it's going to do, very simple. It has three images, one at 480, one at 960, one at 1920, which I've reiterated a bunch of times now. The viewport width is going to change, and when the viewport width gets wider than the image that's currently loaded, it will just load the next one to fill that space. And then when it gets wider than 960, it will load the next one to fill that space. And we can see that in the inspector. Let me refresh now that I've added the viewport, the width dimension. So here it is again. I've downloaded the logo image 50 by 50. I've downloaded the featured work images 480 by 150, and I've downloaded the mobile hero image 480 by 250. As I resize the browser, once I get above 480, I'm at 370, 80, 90, 400, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Oh, something just happened. I hit 482. Actually, I hit 481. And it made a network request to go download the 960 by 250 image. Because now the viewport is wider than 480, it went and downloaded the next sized image. Are you serious? Do you guys see what I did? Did I really just do that? No way. No way did I do that. I did. I bet you guys watched it the whole time too, didn't you? The whole freaking time. You're like, haha, he's working in the wrong image. All right, I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it above this. And we'll just get rid of source set altogether. And sizes, because we don't need that for this image. And put this back to 480 by 150. This is what happens when you work all day and try to make a video at night. And what I need is this hero image, right? Not featured image. I need hero image and responsive image, and this is awesome placeholder image, because you don't want duplicate alt tag values, alt attribute values. And I think the rest of that can stay, and then I can get rid of this. Okay, that's what we should have. That's more like it. I wonder why the hero image didn't change when I resized the browser, because that was kind of awkward. So now these are still 480 by 150 like they're supposed to be, and boom, 960 by 250. It did change, right? And then if I get wider, eventually, once I get past 960, 940, 30, 40, 50, boom. Oh, there's a little blink there. Wow, that is tiny. That's very small. That's very small. That's why 19,000 pixels wide. Let's fix that. There we go. So I'm at 958. Boom, 960. I get my 1920 by 350. Now, here's the kicker to all of this, because what's happened is the browser has said, "Hey, your viewport is this wide," so it went and downloaded that image and applied it to this image tag. But what happens if I go narrower from here? Like if I'm on my desktop and I want to move my browser around and I resize the browser, shouldn't it just switch back out? Nope. Nope, not doing it. Not going to happen. Once you've downloaded and set the larger image using the source set attribute, if you do it that way, it will not switch it back to a smaller one if you shrink the viewport. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that with the image source set, it only works on load. It doesn't work in reverse. It only works going up. It doesn't work going back down. So with that, that's it. That's all there is to it. This thing is done. And it was a little bit more complicated than it probably should have been. I think I did one with I forget who it was I was working with the other day. We did one on CodePen. Lisa, I think. It was Lisa. And it was like, I don't know how we did it, but it ended up being like just a couple of lines of CSS and the whole thing was done. And I was like, what the heck? But of course, there was no font styling or anything. It was all placeholder images, and we just worked out the responsiveness. So it probably would have been a couple more with the font sizing, but overall, like layout-wise, it was just a couple of lines of CSS, and it was amazing. So there it is. Now you can see as I shrink my header. Oh no! Come back, inspector. I guess I'll dock it back to the bottom again. I don't know why I took it out. When I click on my header and select it, you can see that I have like the asterisk selector, right? That's at the bottom. And then I have my default header styling applied first. And then I've got a 720 breakpoint, and then another 720 breakpoint with a multi-class selector. So so you can see like the cascade goes from the bottom. If you go from the bottom up, this is all the mobile stuff at the bottom here, and then this would be like tablet up to desktop. And if I go smaller, you can see that the media queries disappear, so that the phone is doing as little rendering as possible, right? Like content doesn't have anything at all. Just this responsive image thing going on, responsive image class. Featured work just has some margin. My H2 is centered with a font size. This class doesn't have anything at all. Featured items just have some margin at the top and bottom, and that's it. And that's all the styling, in the text align center. That's all the styling that's involved for the mobile. But as I get larger, right, when I start hitting some breakpoints, then more styling comes in. Very, very minimal, pretty minimal styling, except for like fonts. But that's the way fonts work. Like you're gonna do that kind of stuff with fonts. I would have preferred to only have like 3 breakpoints for fonts, and I probably could have, done a little bit better. But there it is. That's all there is to it. It's a really simple layout. and fairly easy to achieve. And you know, you guys follow this if you want. I really don't, you know, I wouldn't recommend that you follow my code exactly, but what I really want you to take away from all of this is the mobile first approach and how that works and why that's important. And what happened to my resize thing? It's gone. I know. I lost it. There it is. I just dragged that out to my other monitor. There we go. Disappeared on me. The mobile first approach and why that's important, right? Minimal CSS processing, parsing for the phone, and then, you know, as it gets wider, you know, tablets are marginally a little more powerful than phones, but desktops are definitely way more powerful. Laptops and desktops are definitely way more powerful with dedicated graphics cards and dedicated CPUs and all that kind of stuff. More RAM, all that kind of stuff, right? So anything above, like, I don't know, 900 and something, 992, whatever it is, 1024, I guess, for iPads. Anything above that would probably be a desktop. I guess maybe you got some Kindle Fire devices or whatever, and some Galaxy tablets that do like a 1920 by 1080 resolution, I think now maybe, but still, those are, you're talking about high-end, like really high-end tablets, like super expensive tablets. So they should be able to handle it no problem, but still, you want to try to keep your CSS to a minimum for anything that you do. You know, bigger projects are going to take more CSS to complete. Always pay attention to painting and rendering and things like that. And I get into more in-depth stuff later on if you guys want. I can make more in-depth videos with better layouts that require more styling and stuff. So, and maybe add in some actual images instead of these placeholder images. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. And as always, if anyone's got any questions, comments, or concerns, hit me up on Slack, send me a message on the forums, or Discord. Find me in there. If I'm not in there, you can direct message me in Discord, and I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all the feedback I've gotten so far, and good luck in the rest of the course. And if it turns out that I need to make some more videos for other topics in JavaScript or whatever it is we get into, then, you know, I might do those too. All right. So that's going to do it for this project. Good luck and have fun.